The county courthouse in Willow Creek had never seen a crowd like this. The hallways had become a river of murmurs long before the doors to Courtroom 4B even opened. People pressed shoulder to shoulder, craning their necks for a glimpse of anything. Lawyers, officers, the grieving widow, even the defendant whose name had become a dark whisper on local news channels. Inside, the courtroom buzzed like an electrical current. Even the fluorescent lights seemed louder than usual, humming relentlessly above the packed wooden benches. A tension hung in the air so thick that no one dared cough or shuffle too loudly. It felt like the whole town had taken one giant breath and forgotten to let it out. Near the front, Lena Carter sat stiffly, her back unnaturally straight, as if slouching would somehow betray her husband's memory. Her hands were clenched in her lap, but the tremble in her fingers betrayed the calm expression she fought to hold. Her eyes kept wandering to the door every few seconds, waiting, dreading, hopping. Beside her, swinging her legs, was Emma, her 3-year-old daughter. Emma wore a tiny yellow dress with embroidered daisies, the one Lena had chosen because it made her look brave and bright, even though both of them felt anything but. The girl clutched a stuffed animal, its fur worn from months of restless nights and tear-soaked sleep. She didn't fully understand why she was here, only that grown-ups used hushed voices and sad eyes whenever they talked about her daddy. The bailiff cleared his throat, and a hush fell over the crowd like a curtain dropping. The judge entered, an older woman with a stern face softened only slightly by the silver streaks in her hair. Her gavel struck once. Court is now in session. Papers rustled. Lawyers stood. Cameras from approved media outlets quietly clicked into place, but none of that compared to the weight of what came next. For our next witness, the judge announced, adjusting her glasses, the court will hear the testimony of K-9 Officer Bolt. The room responded with a low ripple of whispers. A dog. People exchanged confused looks. Others leaned forward. Emma's head snapped up, and her small brows lifted in recognition she couldn't possibly have had, at least, not according to every adult who believed she had been shielded from the details of that night. But as the side door opened and Officer Bolt entered, everything changed. The German shepherd moved with authority, steady, composed, muscles rippling beneath his dark coat. His handler walked beside him, but everyone could see that Bolt wasn't following anyone. He was participating. His amber eyes scanned the courtroom, alert yet calm, taking in the shifting bodies, the tension, the weight of the moment. Emma gasped softly. There was no mistaking it. Her tiny hand shot up, pointing directly at the K-9 before her mother could react. All at once whispers died, heads turned, even the judge paused mid-note. Emma's little voice rang out, not loud, but clear enough to slice through the silence like a blade. Doggy saw. A collective breath was sucked in by nearly 100 people. No one blinked. No one moved. It was as if the words were still hanging in the air, refusing to fall. Lena froze, her eyes widening in horror. This was not part of the plan. She had been told Emma would simply sit with her, quietly, safely away from the spotlight. The prosecution had made no indication, none at all, that Emma's knowledge of Bolt's presence was even remotely possible. The defense attorney shot to his feet. Objection. This is highly improper. She's a toddler. This is prejudicial. But his voice faded as people turned their attention back to Emma. Her little hand was still outstretched, unwavering. She looked at Bolt the way a child looks at something familiar, something trusted. The judge raised a hand. "Ms. Carter," she said gently to Lena, "did your daughter have knowledge of this K-9 officer prior to today?" Lena shook her head numbly. "No, Your Honor. I didn't even know they were bringing him." The judge looked to the prosecution. "Is this accurate?" The lead prosecutor stepped forward, sweat visible on his temple despite his controlled expression. "Yes, Your Honor. Officer Bolt's presence today was arranged privately this morning. There was no public notice." Which only deepened the mystery. Emma, the judge said, her voice softening further as she addressed the child directly, when you say doggy saw, what do you mean? Emma blinked, her eyes big and round, her gaze shifting toward the man at the defense table, Roy Danner. He sat rigid, unblinking, pretending to be indifferent, but a small twitch in his jaw gave him away. Emma lowered her hand from Bolt and instead pointed directly at Roy. The courtroom exhaled a broken, disbelieving gasp. Roy's face hardened, but then, just for a fraction of a second, something like fear flickered across his eyes. "Sweetheart," the judge said softly, "why are you pointing at that man?" Emma's bottom lip trembled. She swallowed, clutching her stuffed animal tighter, and whispered, "Daddy was crying. Doggy saw why." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. People covered their mouths. A reporter dropped a pen that clattered loudly against the floor. Lena's entire body jolted. She put a hand over her daughter's ear, protective instincts firing, though the words were already out there, words no one could take back. Roy surged forward suddenly, his chair screeching behind him. "This is ridiculous. She's being coached, this is." But before he could finish, Bolt lifted his head sharply, ears pointed, body tensed like a coiled spring. A low growl vibrated from his chest. The sound rolled through the courtroom like distant thunder. All eyes snapped between Roy and the dog. Roy stumbled back a step, and that's when it hit everyone. Not the growl itself, but Roy's reaction to it. He didn't just flinch. He recognized it. And that recognition, raw, instinctive, impossible to fake, sent a cold ripple of realization through every inch of the courtroom. Something had happened between Roy and that dog. Something no one had known until Emma pointed her tiny finger. Something the entire courtroom suddenly realized might unravel the case in ways no one had expected. And Bolt wasn't finished reacting. He took one deliberate step toward Roy, eyes locked, tail stiff, waiting, almost as if he knew the past had finally caught up with the man who had tried so hard to bury it. And in that suspended, breathless moment, the courtroom went completely silent. The courtroom hung on Emma's tiny words like a fragile glass ornament, waiting to see if it would shatter. Doggy saw. She had said it softly, almost like a secret, yet the entire room felt its weight. People were leaning forward, straining to hear the next syllable, as if 3 words from a toddler could really expose the darkest corners of the night no one had dared speak of. Emma didn't look away. Her finger still pointed at Roy Danner, her expression serious beyond her years. The German Shepherd Bolt shifted slightly on the floor, ears swiveling, nose twitching, as if he were tracking not just the moment but the truth that lingered in the air. The crowd noticed, and an uneasy silence fell like a thick fog over the room. The defense attorney, Mitchell Kane, tried to regain control. "Your Honor, I must protest. This is preposterous. A toddler cannot testify to these matters. It is hearsay, speculation, and emotionally manipulative." His voice was loud enough to echo in the rafters, but even he could not mask the tremor that had crept in. Roy's reaction had unsettled him too. The judge, Honorable Marjorie Heller, looked over her glasses, expression tight but measured. "Mr. Kane, the objection is noted," she said slowly, her voice calm yet cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. "But given the unusual circumstances of this case, the court will allow the child to continue. Let us proceed with care, but do not interrupt unnecessarily." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She squeezed Emma's tiny shoulder, a quiet reassurance, though the girl barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed. She had seen something. She remembered everything. "Emma," the judge prompted gently, "what do you mean when you say the doggy saw what happened?" Emma's eyes flicked to Bolt, who had suddenly raised his massive head as though waiting for her cue. A low, barely audible growl emanated from the dog, sending a ripple of tension through the courtroom. People shivered despite themselves. There was a primal weight in that growl, a warning, a recognition, a memory encoded in muscle and fur. Emma whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Doggy saw what the bad man did to Daddy." The words, fragile yet potent, ricocheted off the wooden panels, bouncing between stunned faces. The reporter in the corner of the courtroom froze mid-scribble. The photographer lowered his camera, unsure whether to capture a moment of innocence or horror. And Roy Danner, turned an ashen shade of gray, his chair scraping backward sharply against the floor. "Objection," Mitchell Kane barked, rising so fast his papers nearly flew to the floor. "This is utterly prejudicial. The child's statement is entirely based on imagination or coaching." But even as Kane spoke, the murmurs of the courtroom told another story. Every eye was on Emma, on Bolt, on the man whose calm had cracked into fear. And somewhere deep in the room, in the bone-deep silence, it was clear. Roy's reaction was not pretend. Judge Heller held up her hand again, silencing Kane. Her voice was steady, almost serene, but carried an edge that made even the attorneys pause. "Mr. Kane, your objection is recorded. The court will consider it. For now, let the witness continue. And Ms. Carter," she nodded to Emma, "please answer truthfully." Emma nodded, sucking in a shaky breath. Then, with the seriousness of someone far older than 3, she recounted the scene that had haunted her dreams for months. "Daddy was on the floor. He was hurt. The bad man, he hit him. And then Doggy came. Doggy protected me." Gasps ran through the courtroom like electricity. Some covered their mouths. Others whispered frantically to their neighbors. The idea of a police dog intervening in such a personal, terrifying incident was chilling enough. But what Emma revealed next sent a ripple of disbelief through every corner of the room. "Doggy saw everything," she said. "He knows." Her tiny finger pointed back toward Roy, who now sat frozen, trembling as the color drained from his face. The German Shepherd, Bolt, let out a single bark, a sharp, commanding sound that reverberated off the walls. It was not playful. It was a warning. Every muscle in his body was rigid, every hair on his neck standing on end. Bolt's gaze was locked on Roy with a precision that suggested memory, recognition, and judgment. Roy recoiled as though struck. He rose, hands clenching the edges of his table, his voice faltering. This is absurd," he stammered. "A child, a dog, this is nonsense." But the courtroom knew, instinctively, that his panic was real. Even the reporters, trained to remain impartial, exchanged glances. There was a truth in the room that no one could deny, something in that tiny girl, and that powerful dog had unearthed a secret Roy had hoped would stay buried forever. The prosecutor, Daniel Cruz, stood, his voice calm but firm, slicing through the tension. "Your Honor, if I may, the child has no prior knowledge of the dog's involvement in the incident. Her statement is spontaneous. And as for the dog, Officer Bolt has been trained to respond to specific cues from events, people, and threats. His behavior is not random." Cruz paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We intend to submit evidence showing the K-9's presence and actions on the night in question. This testimony is pivotal." The judge leaned back, folding her hands, and let the statement linger. Then she turned to Emma. "Do you remember what happened next, Emma?" The little girl nodded slowly, clutching her stuffed animal. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Doggy protected me. He wouldn't let the bad man come near me. Daddy didn't wake up. I was scared. Doggy kept me safe." The room fell silent, the sound of a clock ticking somewhere in the back becoming deafening. Lena's chest tightened, tears spilling down her cheeks, but she didn't move. She couldn't. She was rooted to the spot, watching her daughter recount a nightmare with clarity that no child should possess. Bolt shifted slightly, a low rumble resonating from his chest as though affirming every word. People in the room instinctively leaned back, giving the dog space, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Roy's hand twitched, gripping the table edge with white-knuckled desperation. "She's lying. This is impossible," he shouted, voice cracking. But even as he said it, his own body betrayed him. He flinched when Bolt barked again, more insistently this time. stepping forward slightly as if guided by invisible strings of memory and instinct. A reporter whispered to her colleague, almost under her breath, "He knows she's telling the truth. That look, that fear isn't acting." The judge's gavel hit the wood once, a sharp crack that reverberated across the courtroom. "Mr. Danner," she said, her voice cold now, "if you cannot remain seated and composed, I will have you removed immediately. This court will not tolerate disruption." Roy's lips trembled, his eyes darting toward Bolt, then to Emma, then back to the floor as though trying to hide from the evidence staring him in the face. And in that instant, something unspoken passed between the child and the dog, an acknowledgement that they were not alone, that they were watched over, and that the truth was no longer just a fragile memory. Emma took a deep breath and said two words that made the entire courtroom shiver in anticipation. "He saw." Every head turned, every heart paused, every mind raced. What had Bolt seen? What could a dog, a child, and one broken night reveal to unravel a lifetime of lies? The courtroom didn't know yet, but everyone could feel the storm coming. And in that instant it was clear. Nothing in Willow Creek would ever be the same again. Roy Danner's face had gone pale, ashen, almost ghostly. Sweat beaded along his hairline, dripped down the sides of his face, and collected in the furrows of his brow. The courtroom seemed to shrink around him, as if the walls themselves had turned to stone, pressing him into a corner he could not escape. Every eye was fixed on him, every heartbeat in the room sinking to his visible panic. He had never been afraid like this before, not in jail cells, not in interrogations, not in the quiet dark of his own home where he thought no one could see. But now he was unmasked, naked before the entire county. And it wasn't just the words of a toddler, it wasn't just the memories she carried, it was the dog, Bolt. The enormous German shepherd sitting motionless but charged with a presence so undeniable it could pierce steel. Bolt was not a pet, Bolt was judgment, and he knew. Emma, still clutching her worn, stuffed animal, looked up at the dog and whispered softly, "Doggy, remember." Her small voice trembled, but there was determination in her eyes. The kind of determination only a child who had survived terror could possess. Bolt's ears twitched. He lowered his massive head slightly, nuzzled her gently as if to affirm that he did indeed remember. And then, without warning, he fixed Roy with a look that would haunt the man for the rest of his life. The courtroom was silent. Every camera, every journalist, every observer held their breath. Even the judge leaned forward, her gavel resting lightly on the desk, waiting. Roy tried to speak. His voice came out shaky, breaking with desperation. This is ridiculous. That child, that dog, it's a trick. You can't." But Bolt stood. The handler tightened the leash, whispering commands under his breath, but the dog's eyes never left Roy. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, precise, and loaded with memory. "Stop, get him, get him away," Roy screamed, rising from his chair and knocking over the defense table in his panic. Papers flew like startled birds. Attorneys and officers scrambled to keep him restrained, but the terror on his face was raw and uncontainable. It was no longer anger. It was fear, the kind that comes from knowing every lie you've told is unraveling in real time. Emma clutched the stuffed animal to her chest, looking up at the judge with wide, innocent eyes. "Doggy saw, he knows what he did," she said quietly, almost a whisper meant for no one but Bolt. Yet the words echoed through the courtroom like a drumbeat, steady and relentless. The judge's gavel struck the table with authority. "Order in the court." Her voice boomed, carrying the weight of decades of law. "Security, remove Mr. Danner if necessary. He will not disrupt these proceedings." Roy froze mid-step. His eyes darted between Bolt and Emma, panic twisting his features like molten wax. His hands shook uncontrollably. He tried to form words, pleas, denials, excuses, but none of it came out coherently. He could feel every eye on him, every judgmental heartbeat in the room, and for the first time he realized that his carefully constructed world had collapsed. A deep, low growl rolled from Bolt's chest, a sound so primal it drew instinctive flinches from everyone in the courtroom. Officers edged closer, ready to intervene, but the dog remained disciplined, moving only toward Roy's space, a silent sentinel of truth. The growl was a warning, a reminder, a proclamation. The lies end here. Lena's hands flew to her mouth. Tears ran freely down her cheeks as she whispered to no one in particular, "She's telling the truth, my baby. She remembers everything." Emma's small figure seemed impossibly strong in that moment, a tiny force commanding attention in a room filled with adults. The prosecutor, Daniel Cruz, stood, his presence calm but forceful. He gestured toward Bolt. "Your Honor, the dog's behavior is consistent with documented K-9 training and prior involvement in the incident. Officer Bolt was present on the night of the assault and is able to identify individuals involved through situational recall. His response to Mr. Danner is neither random nor coincidental." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Even some in the back rows, who had come expecting a spectacle, felt the weight of the moment pressing against their chests. There was a truth here, undeniable and raw, that a child and a dog had revealed. Roy's legs buckled. He dropped to the floor, clutching his head as though trying to squeeze the terror out of his skull. No, this isn't real, this isn't happening," his voice cracked, a mix of panic and shame that seemed to echo off the high ceilings. Bolt's stance didn't waver. He stepped closer, head low, eyes locked on Roy. It was a deliberate, almost ceremonial movement. The dog wasn't attacking. He was pointing, silently indicting the man who had tried to hide his guilt behind arrogance and denial. It was the kind of presence that spoke louder than words, a presence that demanded recognition of truth. Emma's small voice cut through the charged silence. He hurt Daddy. Doggy saw, he's a bad man." Each word was deliberate, trembling slightly, but heavy with certainty. The room collectively shivered at the impact of those two simple words. Roy screamed, a sound that was half rage and half terror. "Stop! Get that dog away, she's lying, she's lying." But even as he yelled, it was clear to everyone watching that he was not lying. His fear was real. Bolt's presence had undone years of lies in a single, silent judgment. The judge rose slightly, signaling security to approach. "Mr. Danner," she said, her voice calm but lethal, "you will remain seated or be removed immediately. This court will not be intimidated." Roy's hands shook violently as he tried to back away from Bolt. Officers stepped in, but the scene was almost ceremonial. Roy on the floor, writhing in panic, Bolt standing like an immovable statue, and Emma, small but resolute, witnessing her own courage reflected in the dog beside her. A witness from the prosecution leaned in, whispering evidence about the night's events, timestamps, police logs, and security footage that had previously been unseen by the defense. The pieces were beginning to form a mosaic, but it was Emma and Bolt who had delivered the first, most damning strike. The courtroom sat frozen, caught in the suspense of a revelation no one had anticipated. Cameras flashed quietly, pens scratched frantically, and hearts pounded. The story of one night, a night of terror, courage, and survival, was unfolding in real time, and it was being narrated by the most unexpected witnesses, a toddler and a German shepherd. And as Roy trembled, caught in the gravity of exposure, the room realized something chilling. This was only the beginning. The truth had been revealed in flashes, small, cutting, undeniable, but the full story had yet to emerge. Every eye in the room was waiting, every breath held, and every thought gripped by curiosity and horror. The tension was palpable, the suspense unbearable. And in that courtroom, the world seemed to narrow to a single point: a terrified man, a brave little girl, and the dog that had seen everything. And then, as if sensing the next move, Bolt shifted slightly, his amber eyes never leaving Roy's face, and the room collectively realized that the next words from Emma could shatter the fragile remnants of Roy's composure entirely. Everyone waited. The silence was deafening. And Emma spoke again. The courtroom was electric. Every heartbeat felt amplified, every breath of the audience synchronized to the silent war unfolding at the front. Roy Danner sat slumped on the floor, trembling violently, his arms wrapped around his head as officers hovered nearby. Bolt, the German shepherd, remained perfectly still, an unwavering presence, almost statuesque in its intensity. But the growl had lingered, a deep rumble vibrating through the room and into the bones of every observer. That single sound had shattered the thin veneer Roy had relied upon for years. Emma, small and fragile, clutched her stuffed animal as if it were an anchor to reality, but her gaze never wavered. She had already delivered the truth in pieces, a toddler's clarity, a child's courage, but the prosecutor knew that the next step could transform testimony into undeniable proof. "Your Honor," Daniel Cruz, the lead prosecutor, said, adjusting his glasses and walking to the front with measured confidence, "we have additional evidence that will corroborate the child's testimony and Officer Bolt's behavior." He paused, letting the words sink into the tension-filled air. "The court has been provided with video footage that confirms the events of that night. This footage is crucial. It is factual, indisputable, and directly supports the statements made here today." Murmurs ran through the courtroom like wildfire. Reporters scribbled feverishly, pens scratching, cameras flashing occasionally. Even the judge leaned forward, her expression betraying curiosity she rarely showed. Emma's head tilted slightly. "Video?" she asked, small, almost innocent, yet imbued with an instinctual understanding. "Yes, sweetheart," Lena whispered, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "They'll show it on the big screen. You don't need to do anything." The lights dimmed slightly. A projection screen descended slowly, like a curtain rising on a long-awaited act. The hush of anticipation was palpable. No one dared breathe too loudly. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," Cruz began, "this footage comes from a neighbor's home security camera. It captures audio and partial visual from the night of the incident. The visuals are grainy, yes, but the enhanced audio allows us to hear key moments. I ask that you pay close attention." The grainy footage began. Shadows moved across a dimly lit porch. A voice, harsh and sharp, echoed through the audio, a voice that instantly made every stomach in the room churn. "Get that animal away from me," the man's voice shouted. The courtroom froze. Everyone knew who it was: Roy Danner. Then came another sound, a thud, a low, pained groan. Emma's fingers tightened around her stuffed toy. She whispered almost inaudibly, "That's Daddy." The footage showed a flash of movement, shadowed, indistinct, but the audio carried the unmistakable sound of struggle. And then, a bark. One bark, sharp and commanding, unmistakably a police dog. Bolt's growl earlier wasn't random. He had remembered. He had reacted then just as he reacted now. Roy's hands shook, his face a mask of terror. His defense attorney's jaw dropped, powerless to counter the truth unraveling on the screen. The neighbor's footage showed a brief glimpse of a child hugging a large dog. Emma gasped softly. "That's me," she whispered, tears brimming. A murmur ran through the courtroom. People exchanged glances. How could a child's memory and a dog's instincts align with a video no one knew existed? Bolt shifted slightly, moving closer to Emma as if to reassure her. The growl had returned, softer this time, but still commanding. It vibrated through the floorboards and the walls, a living reminder of what had happened that night. Lena's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the pew. The emotional weight of the moment threatened to overwhelm her. She had survived her husband's death, raised her child alone, and now she witnessed a silent, uncanny form of justice unfold in real time. Roy stood swaying unsteadily. "This isn't real. That video, that dog, his voice cracked, a combination of rage and fear. "It doesn't mean anything." But even as he shouted, the evidence told a different story. Bolt's ears twitched. The dog leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Roy. His growl rumbled quietly, a persistent, primal warning. The judge's gavel struck with sharp authority. "Order in the court." "Mr. Danner, if you cannot maintain composure, you will be removed immediately. The evidence is being presented. There will be no further disruption." Roy's legs buckled again. He sank onto the floor, hands trembling as he buried his face. His body shook violently. Emma's tiny words had shattered his defenses, and now the video corroborated her every claim. "Doggy, remember," Emma whispered softly, looking down at Bolt. She pressed the toy to her chest. The dog leaned into her, steady and unwavering, a silent guardian. Cruz stepped forward, gesturing toward the screen. "Notice the dog's behavior," he said. "He is alert, protective, and responsive. This is consistent with a trained K9 recognizing threats and protecting a child. The child's memory, the dog's actions, and the video evidence all align. It is undeniable." The gallery held its breath. Even the court reporter paused mid-note, sensing the gravity of the moment. Roy's face contorted in panic, disbelief, and desperation. "No, this isn't happening. It can't be true." Bolt barked again, low and commanding, and in that moment, Roy froze completely. The fear in his eyes was raw, primal, and unshieldable. It was as though every lie, every hidden action, and every cruel choice he had made had finally caught up to him. Emma's small voice broke the silence. "He hurt Daddy. Doggy saw he's bad." Two simple words, yet their weight was monumental. The room collectively exhaled, stunned by the clarity and force of a child's truth. The judge adjusted her glasses, her gaze fixed on Roy. "Mr. Danner," she said evenly, "your reaction to this evidence speaks volumes. You will remain silent and compliant while the court completes its proceedings." Roy collapsed again, shaking, mumbling incoherent denials. Security moved in cautiously, aware that this was more than panic. It was a complete unraveling of a man's facade. Bolt stayed alert, his gaze unwavering, every muscle taut. The courtroom was silent but for the soft whimpers of the child and the low rumble of the dog. It was a tableau of justice, primal and undeniable. Emma, small but resolute, looked up at the court and said softly, "Doggy saw, he knows. He remembers Daddy." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The combined force of a child's memory, a dog's instinct, and video evidence had pierced every shield, shattered every lie, and made a roomful of adults realize the truth in the most cinematic, chilling way. And as the lights dimmed further to focus on the screen, the room waited for what would happen next, because in that moment it was clear that the case was no longer about testimony. It was about confrontation, reckoning, and a truth that would not be denied. Every eye remained fixed, every breath held, every heart beating in suspense. And the storm had only just begun. The courtroom was suffused with tension, an invisible current that made the hairs on everyone's arms stand at attention. Emma's words had struck like thunder. "Doggy saw, he knows Daddy." But now the prosecutor, Daniel Cruz, prepared to present the evidence that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind. Video footage from the night of the incident. The lights dimmed again. A hush fell over the gallery, broken only by the soft, almost imperceptible whir of a projector. The crowd leaned forward, journalists adjusting their cameras, security officers straightening in their seats. Everyone knew this was the moment when speculation would either solidify into conviction or crumble into chaos. "This footage," Cruz began, his voice steady and deliberate, "was captured from a neighbor's security camera. While the visuals are not perfect, the audio and motion are critical. The clip has been enhanced for clarity and reveals the interactions of those present the night in question." The screen flickered to life, grainy black and white images appearing like a shadow play. The camera showed the exterior of a modest suburban home. A faint light glowed from a porch window, casting long, ominous shadows. Then came the first sound, a sharp bark, precise and commanding. Everyone in the courtroom flinched. Bolt's bark from that night had echoed beyond the walls of the house into the quiet neighborhood, and now it played back as evidence. A voice, unmistakably Roy Danner's, pierced the night. "Get that animal away from me." The room collectively stiffened. Emma's small hand flew to her mouth. Lena's chest tightened. Even the judge leaned forward, gripping the edge of her bench. The grainy footage was fragmented, shadows shifting like dancers, but one thing was horrifyingly clear. A struggle had taken place. The sound of a body hitting the floor, followed by a low groan, sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. The camera didn't capture everything, but it captured enough. An audio enhancement left no room for misinterpretation. Emma whispered, "That's Daddy." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were resolute, fixed on the screen as if witnessing the memory anew. Bolt's growl from that night resonated in the enhanced audio. The German Shepherd had not only seen the events unfold, he had reacted, guarding, defending, and observing in a way that was instinctive yet profoundly intelligent. The courtroom understood immediately that this was not merely a dog acting on training, it was a living witness. Roy's hands shook violently. He rose unsteadily, muttering incoherent denials, but every movement betrayed his fear. His face, once flushed with attempted bravado, had drained of color. Even his defense attorney, Mitchell Kane, looked shaken, glancing at the judge and back to the screen, knowing that the evidence was damning. "Notice here," Cruz said, pointing to the video, "the child is present. Observe how Bolt positions himself between the child and Mr. Danner. This is not accidental behavior. It is a trained response to threat, and it correlates with Ms. Carter's testimony." Emma's small voice rang out, almost above a whisper, "Doggy kept me safe." Bolt, seated near Emma in the courtroom now, shifted slightly as if acknowledging the memory. His amber eyes were sharp, unwavering, trained on the defendant as if to say, "I remember everything." The footage continued. Shadows danced across the porch. A flash of motion, Roy lunging, the dog reacting instantly, Emma screaming softly. A blur of chaos, the sound of a thud followed by the whimper of someone hurt. And then the faint sound of a child crying. Emma's tiny fingers clutched her stuffed animal tighter. "That's me," she whispered. Her words were small, but they carried the weight of a truth years in the making. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos but in collective understanding. Every adult present seemed to lean forward involuntarily, captivated and horrified. Reporters scribbled faster than their hands could manage. Cameras clicked silently. The murmur of voices ran through the back of the room, but no one dared speak over the evidence being revealed. Roy swayed on his feet, disbelief and panic blending into a storm of terror. No, that's not that Ka," his voice cracked, futile against the irrefutable proof now projected on the screen. Bolt shifted slightly, ears pricked, growling softly but steadily. Every muscle in his body radiated discipline and focus. He was not merely a dog, he was a guardian, a witness, and a reminder of everything Roy had tried to hide. Lena's hands trembled in her lap. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to no one in particular. She survived. She was safe because of him, because of Bolt. Cruz's voice cut through the charged silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, the video corroborates every word of the child's testimony. It shows not only the presence of the accused, but also the protective actions of Officer Bolt. It confirms the chain of events and demonstrates the truth that has been hidden until now." The judge adjusted her glasses, her face unreadable, but the atmosphere of the room had shifted palpably. The scale of justice, long theoretical, was now immediate, visual, undeniable. Roy dropped to his knees. His face was contorted with panic, shame, and something far deeper, guilt. He looked at Bolt, then at Emma, then down at the floor, unable to speak coherently. Emma, still small but remarkably composed, took a deep breath. He hurt Daddy," she said clearly, pointing a tiny finger at Roy. "Doggy saw, he's a bad man." 2 words, simple, unyielding. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Bolt leaned forward, head low, and let out a final, low growl, his amber eyes locked on Roy as though marking him. It was an unspoken verdict. It carried the weight of instinct, training, and experience, a verdict that no human argument could overturn. The gallery whispered. Some gasped audibly. Some instinctively leaned closer to their neighbors. It was a moment of reckoning where innocence, loyalty, and instinct converged to expose a horrifying truth. The judge rapped her gavel sharply. Order in the court. Mr. Danner, you will remain silent. Your actions, reactions, and the evidence presented leave this court with no ambiguity. We will proceed accordingly. Roy slumped, trembling, broken, and defeated. The footage had done what words alone could not. Emma's testimony, combined with the dog's presence and the undeniable visuals, had shattered his defenses entirely. Lena exhaled shakily, tears flowing freely now, as she reached for Emma's tiny hand. Emma squeezed back, her small body calm and resolute despite the intensity of the moment. Bolt remained by her side, a silent protector, unwavering sentinel and living testament to the night's events. And as the screen went dark, signaling the end of the video, the room remained in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The gravity of the evidence had not just revealed the past, it had changed the present forever. The storm had arrived. The courtroom waited. And no one, not even Roy Danner, could escape what came next. The courtroom remained frozen in a tense hush. The video footage had ended, the screen now dark, but the memory it had imprinted on every witness was searing. Emma's words, the little girl's unwavering finger, and Bolt's commanding presence had shattered the illusion of safety Roy Danner had long relied upon. But as Daniel Cruz stepped back, a new layer of tension gripped the room. The question of whether justice could be made real in the same space as fear, truth, and innocence. Bolt shifted slightly, rising to his massive paws. His amber eyes were fixed on Roy, unwavering, every muscle taut, every movement deliberate. He wasn't merely standing, he was preparing, anticipating, making a choice. It was a choice that no human witness could force or fabricate. Bolt had seen, Bolt remembered, Bolt knew, and now he would act on that knowledge. Roy's trembling increased. He sank to the floor again, hands clenching the edge of the defense table, teeth grinding. No, I didn't, she's lying, it's all lies, he screamed. But his voice betrayed him, the pitch, the hesitation, the panic. They were proof he couldn't control. Every eye in the courtroom registered it. Even his attorney, Mitchell Kane, looked helpless, jaw tight, papers trembling in his hands. Emma, small but unshakably present, watched Bolt with a quiet focus. "Doggy," she whispered, almost to herself. "Remember, you saw, you know." She lifted her tiny hand, touching the dog's massive head. Bolt leaned into her touch, acknowledging her, as if confirming the bond forged in terror, survival, and memory. The judge, Honorable Marjorie Heller, adjusted her glasses, her face stoic, yet she too seemed caught in the gravity of the moment. "Officer Bolt," she said, directing her words to the K-9, "please demonstrate your response for the court." Her tone was calm but firm, acknowledging that this animal's actions were now as crucial to the testimony as Emma's words. Bolt took a deliberate step forward, then another, each movement precise. He positioned himself between Emma and Roy, lowering his massive head slightly, muscles coiled in readiness. His growl, low and resonant, rolled through the room, not aggressive but authoritative. Every person felt it in their chest. Officers instinctively straightened. Reporters paused mid-pen stroke. The gallery leaned forward, collectively holding their breath. Roy shrank back, recoiling as though Bolt's very presence could physically touch him with truth. His breathing was erratic, shallow, each inhale trembling. "Get it away! Get it away!" he shouted, rising unsteadily, yet unable to move past the dog. His panic had reached a peak that no courtroom decorum, no attorney's intervention could contain. Lena held Emma close, but the little girl pulled slightly free. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "Doggy, show them. You remember, don't you?" The words were tiny, delicate, yet they resonated with absolute clarity. Bolt responded, stepping closer to Roy, not attacking, not threatening, but demanding accountability. The dog's body language was undeniable, a living, breathing witness marking the accused without a single human word. Emma's gaze hardened, her little frame unwavering as she addressed the courtroom. "He hurt Daddy. Doggy saw. He's a bad man." Her finger pointed directly at Roy. The words echoed through the chamber like a verdict. Two small words, but they carried the weight of months of trauma, survival, and observation. Cruz spoke again, his voice calm but charged with authority. "Your Honor, the dog's actions align perfectly with his documented training and documented presence at the incident. Bolt is not merely reacting. He is corroborating the child's testimony. He identifies the threat. He protects the survivor. He has observed the actions of the accused. There is no question as to the veracity of these simultaneous testimonies." Bolt growled again, low, steady, resonant. The sound was almost ceremonial, a declaration. The courtroom understood it instantly. This was not a show. This was judgment, primal and undeniable. Roy's hands flew to his face. He sank to the floor once more, rocking back and forth. His words were incoherent, a mix of denials, cries, and pleas, but no one listened. No one needed to. Every motion, every tremor, every glance he cast toward Bolt confirmed the truth the dog had silently delivered. The judge, maintaining the solemnity of the room, spoke carefully. "Mr. Danner, your reactions to the child's testimony and the K-9's presence are being recorded. This court will not tolerate obstruction. You are reminded that the truth is being observed, and your behavior will be considered in full." Her gavel tapped the desk sharply, reverberating in the silent room. Emma, resolute, hugged her stuffed animal to her chest and spoke softly but firmly. "Doggy, remember Daddy. Remember what he did." Bolt's ears twitched. He nudged Emma gently, acknowledging her, his gaze flicking toward Roy, reinforcing the message. The child and the dog had formed a perfect, unspoken alliance. The survivor and the witness, memory and instinct, innocence and truth. The gallery murmured quietly. Reporters scribbled every word, noting Bolt's reactions with almost reverent care. The courtroom was no longer merely a place of human law. It had become a stage for an extraordinary witness. The power of instinct, loyalty, and memory surpassed any legal argument. Cruz gestured toward the evidence table. "The dog has indicated the individual responsible. This is consistent with his trained responses. Ms. Carter's testimony is corroborated fully. The court now sees what occurred in a direct, undeniable way." Roy slumped again, utterly defeated. His defenses, both psychological and social, had crumbled. The combined testimony of a child and a dog, paired with corroborative evidence, had stripped him bare. Panic and recognition of guilt were etched into every tremor of his body. Emma whispered again, "Doggy, he knows. He saw Daddy. He won't let the bad man hide." Her voice, small but commanding, hung in the air like a beacon. Bolt shifted, body coiled yet controlled, eyes locked unwaveringly on the man who had once thought he could evade accountability. Lena's chest heaved with relief and anguish. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Her daughter, a child of 3, had not only survived but had delivered truth in the most extraordinary of ways. She looked at Bolt, kneeling beside Emma, and whispered, "Thank you for keeping her safe." The dog's gaze softened slightly, acknowledging the gratitude without breaking the aura of unwavering authority. The courtroom remained in a suspended state. Every person present understood that the moment they had just witnessed could not be replicated. The child, the dog, and the accumulated evidence had created a tableau of justice that was primal, emotional, and irrevocable. Bolt sat firmly beside Emma, body tense but composed, a sentinel of truth. Emma, small but indomitable, looked at the accused, then to the court, and finally back at the dog beside her. The silence was almost unbearable. And then, as if sensing the final chord of the moment, Emma spoke 2 simple words, whispered but carrying the full weight of her testimony. "Bad man." The courtroom collectively inhaled. Every adult present understood. The verdict was not just in the law books. It had been spoken, witnessed, and confirmed in a language older than words, a language of instinct, survival, and courage. Roy Danner's knees buckled. He slumped completely, unable to respond, unarmed against the undeniable truth. Officers moved forward, ready to escort him, while Bolt remained beside Emma, guarding her with unwavering loyalty. Lena reached for her daughter's hand. Emma gave a tiny, resolute squeeze back, the unspoken message clear: she was safe. She had survived, she had witnessed, and she had spoken. The courtroom waited in breathless silence, fully aware that what they had witnessed was extraordinary. A child, a dog, and the unflinching truth standing together in a room built for judgment. The storm had not ended. It had transformed, and it would leave marks on everyone who had witnessed it. And the moment that the child said "bad man" would echo in their minds long after the gavel struck again. The courtroom had transformed into a scene of raw, nearly unbearable tension. The two simple words "bad man" had landed like a thunderclap, resonating through every heart and nerve present. Roy Danner's carefully constructed mask of arrogance and control had shattered completely. He slumped in his chair, shaking, eyes wild and unseeing, muttering fragments of denial and panic. For a moment, it was almost mesmerizing. How quickly a man who had once commanded attention could be reduced to trembling, wordless terror. Officers hovered cautiously, knowing this was not just a physical danger but a psychological eruption. His panic was unpredictable, his desperation palpable. Every movement he made seemed frantic, erratic, unhinged. Yet even as he flailed, Bolt, the German shepherd, remained immovable. His amber eyes locked on the accused, unwavering, every muscle coiled, exuding authority, judgment, and the silent weight of memory. Emma, small but immovable, sat clutching her stuffed animal. Her gaze never wavered from Roy, and she whispered softly to Bolt, "You remember, right? He can't hide." The dog responded with a low, steady growl, a sound that reverberated through the courtroom, vibrating in the floor, the walls, the very air. The gallery collectively shivered. It was a sound older than civilization, a language beyond words, a warning, a reminder, a verdict. Roy's chair screeched backward as he attempted to flee the mounting truth. "No, stop, make it stop, make it stop," he screamed. His voice cracked and trembled, a mixture of fear, rage, and realization that every lie, every hidden act, every cruel choice he had ever made had been exposed. Officers rushed forward, but even they moved cautiously, recognizing that this was a man unraveling before them. Mitchell Kane, his defense attorney, attempted to intervene. "Your Honor, we request, he's having a breakdown. This is inappropriate," the court. Judge Marjorie Heller's gavel struck sharply, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Mr. Kane, your objection is noted. However, Mr. Danner's reactions are part of the record. Security, assist him if necessary, but do not interrupt the proceedings. This court will not be manipulated by theatrics." Roy swayed, hands clutching his head, rocking violently. He stared at Bolt, then at Emma, then at the floor, as if the combined weight of memory, evidence, and instinct had physically pinned him in place. His voice grew louder, more incoherent. It wasn't like that. It wasn't me." The gallery leaned forward instinctively. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked in silence. The courtroom had become a stage for a drama no script could contain. A terrified man, a child survivor, and a dog who had been witness to history. Every element was real, raw, and immediate. Emma, sensing the escalation, whispered to Bolt again, "He can't lie anymore, right?" Bolt responded with a soft whine, leaning slightly toward her, his presence protective yet commanding. Every movement reaffirmed the story they had been telling, one of courage, memory, instinct, and justice. Daniel Cruz, the prosecutor, stepped forward, voice calm but firm, cutting through the emotional storm. "Your Honor, the defendant's behavior confirms the testimony provided by the child and corroborated by the K-9 officer. His panic and incoherence demonstrate acknowledgement and fear consistent with guilt." He gestured toward Bolt, who had now positioned himself fully between Emma and Roy, standing as a living barrier, witness, and protector. Roy suddenly lurched upright, shouting incoherently, "No, she's lying, she's lying." He swung his hands toward Bolt as if the dog could be stopped by sheer willpower. But Bolt didn't budge. His growl deepened, resonating through the courtroom like a warning bell. Every observer instinctively felt the danger and the truth in that sound. The judge's voice cut sharply, commanding full attention. "Mr. Danner, you will remain seated immediately. Security, remove him if necessary." Roy dropped to his knees, trembling violently. He covered his face with his hands, rocking, muttering fragments of denial. "No, she can't. It's not real. It didn't happen." Each word, each tremor, was a testament to the psychological weight pressing down on him. The evidence, the video, the child's testimony, and the dog's behavior had dismantled his facade completely. Emma, resolute and small, rose slightly in her seat. She looked at Bolt, then at Roy, and whispered two simple words that cut through the chaos like a blade. "Bad man." The gallery collectively held their breath. Every officer, reporter, and observer understood the magnitude. The child, the dog, and the courtroom's collective witness had delivered an unspoken verdict, one that no amount of denial could undo. Bolt's growl softened, but he remained alert, eyes locked on the man now writhing in psychological defeat. He had chosen his testimony, not through words, but through presence, instinct, and unwavering attention. Every movement, every growl, every subtle adjustment had reinforced the truth Emma had spoken. Roy collapsed fully, sobbing uncontrollably. His voice broke into incomprehensible whimpers. I didn't mean to stop." Officers approached carefully, restraining him physically, but his psychological unraveling was complete. No physical intervention could erase the reality of what had been revealed in that room. Lena reached forward, instinctively brushing tears from her cheeks. Emma, still clutching her stuffed animal, gave a tiny, resolute nod to her mother. Bolt leaned slightly into her, protective, loyal, and unwavering. For the first time the child smiled, a small, brave, victorious curve of her lips. She had survived, she had witnessed, and she had spoken. The courtroom settled into a tense quiet. The judge looked at the restrained Roy, the trembling child, and the poised dog. She spoke, her voice deliberate and commanding. "Mr. Danner, your actions, the evidence, and your reactions are all on the record. The court has witnessed your acknowledgement in real time. Security, escort him to a holding cell. This court will recess briefly before proceeding with further testimony." The officers moved in, guiding Roy out. He flailed briefly, but Bolt remained between him and Emma, a living testament to the night's events. Every step he took toward the door was shadowed by the K-9's unwavering gaze, a silent guardian ensuring that no harm could come to the child now. As the door closed behind Roy, the courtroom collectively exhaled. The tension, though still present, shifted, like a storm easing after the most violent gusts. People murmured quietly, taking stock of what had just occurred. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled, and the judge allowed a few moments of quiet reflection before continuing the proceedings. Emma remained seated, small but unbowed. Bolt sat beside her, head lowered protectively, muscles coiled yet calm. The alliance between child and dog, survivor and witness, had held against fear, denial, and intimidation. In that moment, the courtroom understood that justice had been served not just by human law, but by instinct, courage, and truth. Lena reached for her daughter, squeezing her hand gently. "You were so brave," she whispered. Emma looked up at her mother, eyes bright, unafraid. She had survived terror and emerged a small, unstoppable force of clarity and courage. Bolt leaned slightly toward her, resting his massive head near Emma's shoulder. He had been a witness, a guardian, and now a partner in ensuring that the truth could not be ignored. His gaze remained locked on the direction Roy had been escorted, a living reminder of the consequences that awaited those who committed harm. The courtroom had changed forever. A child had spoken, a dog had borne witness, and a man had broken, utterly and irreversibly in the face of unassailable truth. The storm had reached its crescendo, and what followed next, the final reckoning, the resolution, the ultimate judgment, would leave the entire courthouse stunned, awed, and forever marked by what had transpired that day. The room held its collective breath. And then, as silence stretched like a drawn-out note, Emma's small voice rose once more. "Doggy, he remembers. He won't let the bad man hide." Bolt growled softly, a final, low vibration of truth as the courtroom realized the magnitude. The climax was near. The final act was about to unfold. The courtroom was electric with suspense. The tension that had built over the past days, the child's testimony, Bolt's primal presence, the harrowing video footage, and Roy Danner's complete psychological unraveling, had reached its peak. Every breath was measured. Every heartbeat seemed amplified. The storm that had been gathering since the first word, the first growl, the first terrified glance, now hovered over the room like a living entity, demanding resolution. Emma sat small but unwavering, clutching her stuffed animal to her chest. Her wide eyes, framed by tear-streaked cheeks, glimmered with quiet determination. Bolt sat at her side, a living sentinel, amber eyes glowing with vigilance, muscles coiled yet restrained, a bridge between innocence and justice. Together they were a force no lie, no denial, no act of human intimidation could overcome. Roy Danner, meanwhile, had been removed from the immediate presence of Emma, but his shadow still loomed large. His face was pale, sweat and tears blending in a grim mask of terror and guilt. His flailing and incoherence had made clear to everyone. This was a man stripped of his defenses, completely exposed. He had known fear in private, but never the pure, primal accountability that Bolt embodied, and he had seen it now, in front of an entire courtroom. Judge Marjorie Heller rose, her voice calm, measured, yet carrying a weight that made every word land like steel. "This court has heard the testimony of the survivor, Ms. Emma Carter. We have witnessed the behavior of Officer Bolt, a trained K-9 who was present during the events in question. We have reviewed corroborating evidence, including video footage that aligns precisely with the child's account and the K-9's reactions. The court acknowledges the gravity and uniqueness of this case." The judge paused, allowing her words to settle, letting the enormity of what had transpired sink into every corner of the room. The gallery leaned forward. Reporters scribbled. The sound of cameras clicking was muted by anticipation. Every observer felt the history of the moment pressing in, almost suffocating in its intensity. "Mr. Danner," she continued, directing her words toward the holding area, "your actions, the documented evidence, and your response to the testimony provided are all part of the record. The court must now proceed with the evaluation of guilt and the determination of consequences." The officers shifted subtly, restraining Roy just beyond the courtroom floor. His body trembled, his eyes darting toward Emma and Bolt, silently pleading for an escape that could never come. Every inch of the room seemed to pulse with judgment, though no words were spoken. Emma's small voice rose, firm and unshakable. "Doggy, he saw everything, he remembers. He won't let him hide." Bolt's low growl resonated through the courtroom like a deep drumbeat. It was not aggressive, yet it was unyielding. It was the voice of truth, memory, and instinct. Every adult present instinctively understood. The dog had chosen his testimony. He had stood as witness. He had observed. He had judged. Daniel Cruz, standing to the side, nodded subtly to the judge. "Your Honor, the combination of the child's testimony, the K-9 officer's behavior, and the corroborating evidence leaves no room for doubt. The actions, reactions, and responses observed in the courtroom reflect the undeniable truth of the events in question. Ms. Carter and Officer Bolt have delivered testimony that is not only compelling but also incontestable." Mitchell Kane, Roy's defense attorney, looked as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. He attempted one final protest, though his words were thin and shaky. "Your Honor, we object. This is unprecedented. A child and a dog cannot." Judge Heller raised a hand, silencing him. Mr. Kane, the objection is recorded. This court recognizes that the testimony in question is unusual, but it is substantiated by evidence. The court's responsibility is to uphold truth and justice, regardless of form or circumstance. The K-9 officer's behavior is considered admissible and relevant. Proceeding is necessary. Roy slumped in his chair beyond the courtroom floor, trembling as if he were made of glass. His lips moved soundlessly, muttering frantic denials. But every observer could see it: the panic, the guilt, the recognition that the law, the child, and the dog had combined into a force he could not resist. Emma, her small frame radiating bravery, whispered softly, "Doggy, show them." Bolt leaned slightly forward, eyes unwavering, ears pricked, muscles tensed in a precise, deliberate display. Every movement, subtle but authoritative, was a living articulation of truth. The room felt it in their bones. Judge Heller's voice cut through the tension, measured and final. The court finds the testimony of Ms. Carter credible. The court recognizes the actions and behavior of Officer Bolt as corroborative. The combined evidence presented demonstrates the events of that night beyond reasonable doubt. Mr. Danner, the court is prepared to issue its ruling. Roy's head jerked up. His eyes were wide, frantic, desperate. He shook his head violently. No, this isn't real. It can't be." His voice cracked with the full weight of uncontained panic, but the courtroom had already absorbed the truth. No scream, no denial, no act of intimidation could undo what had been revealed. The judge's gavel struck sharply, commanding silence. The court hereby finds Roy Danner guilty on all counts of assault and endangerment related to the events of specific date. Sentencing will follow, and restitution to the victim's family will be addressed in full. This court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances of this case, including the crucial testimony provided by a minor and a K-9 officer. Let this be a record that truth can manifest in ways beyond expectation. A collective exhale swept through the room. Some people gasped. Some wept quietly. Lena pressed her daughter to her chest, tears flowing freely. Emma, small but triumphant, clutched her stuffed animal, looking up at Bolt with admiration and relief. The dog nudged her gently, a silent acknowledgement of shared victory and protection. Roy trembled violently, slumped forward, finally silent under the weight of undeniable truth. He had been confronted, exposed, and judged, not merely by human law, but by the instinctual primal force of a dog who had witnessed, remembered, and acted. Daniel Cruz allowed himself a small, restrained nod. The prosecution's case had been extraordinary, unprecedented even, yet flawless in its execution. The combination of evidence, testimony, and instinct had created a moment that would be remembered far beyond the walls of the courthouse. The judge's gavel struck again, quieter this time, but with finality. This court is adjourned until sentencing. Let this day be recorded as one in which justice was served, in a manner both extraordinary and undeniable. The officers escorted Roy out, still trembling, while the courtroom began to slowly empty. Reporters lingered, capturing images of Emma and Bolt together, writing the first lines of stories that would ripple across social media, news outlets, and local conversations for months. Emma, exhausted but calm, whispered to Bolt, "We did it, doggy. We were brave." The dog nudged her hand, resting his massive head near her shoulder, protective and loyal. Lena, tears streaming, bent down to hug her daughter fully. "You were so brave, my love. You've shown everyone courage, truth, and strength. I'm so proud of you." The little girl hugged back, her small arms tight, and whispered again, almost to herself, "Doggy, he saw, he knows. He won't let him hide." Bolt growled softly, a low, approving vibration, and rested beside her, a living testament to survival and truth. As the doors of the courthouse closed behind the departing crowd, the story had reached its conclusion. A child's courage, a dog's instinct, and the truth of an unthinkable night had converged to deliver justice. The storm had passed, but its echoes would linger in the minds and hearts of all who had witnessed it. Emma had survived, Bolt had remembered, Roy Danner had been exposed, and the world had watched a truth unfold that could not be denied. The child, the dog, and the law, their story would be whispered, remembered, and retold for years to come. And in that quiet moment, with the courthouse emptying and the sun casting long shadows across the polished floors, Emma hugged her stuffed animal tightly and smiled, a small but radiant victory shining through the shadows of a night that had threatened to consume her. Bolt rested his massive head beside her, eyes alert, guarding the future, watching over the girl who had spoken the truth no adult could. Together, they had not only survived, they had triumphed. Justice had been served. Truth had prevailed. And the silent witness had spoken,